VikesNow. I am Dustin Baker. I'm here with Josh Frey. We've got a football game in 4 days. We actually have a football game in 2 days. It's just not the Vikings. It's the Chiefs and the now hated Lions. But I'm here with Josh Frey to talk about these Minnesota Vikings because the regular season is this Sunday. How are you, man?
I'm doing good, man. Excited for football again. Kicks off Thursday night, and then like you said, we're rolling into Vikings game on Sunday. It's a great time.
Oh, it absolutely is. You can even incidentally in these parts. I know you're in the Midwest, and so am I. Even at night now, it's getting down into the 50 degrees, so you can open your windows.
Dude, yeah, I woke up this morning. It was like 55 degrees outside. Opened up a window, nice breeze coming in. It's fall. It's fall. I'm
Oh
ready
yeah,
for
it's like a script. The way that the weather's like, all right, in these parts, I don't know about. Well, I can assure you that it's not that way down south. But yeah, last couple nights have arrived, and it's like 55 degrees at night, and I don't even have the air conditioning on. It's a wonderful thing. I asked you going into this show. I said, hey man, should we talk about Bucks and Vikings and what you're watching for there, or do you want to talk about how the Vikings can win a Super Bowl? And you said I didn't come all this way not to talk about week one. I think we've probably done 30 shows together. So we're going to divvy this up. We're going to chat about three things you're watching for Vikings, Buccaneers in particular. And then how can I phrase this? If the Vikings do pull off a Super Bowl push, how that will have happened, what needs to go right. Does that sound good to you?
That sounds perfect.
All right, out of the gate, the Vikings are 6-point favorites over the Buccaneers, which is, I think, the third or fourth largest favorite point spread of the week, which is kind of like, I don't know if I like that. But it is a token of respect. I think on paper, this is the Vikings' easiest game, which is really cool to get off on a good foot if they win. And then after this, it's like, oh, that was it, huh? But tell me, sir, what's one of the first things that fans should watch, and hence you will be watching for this Sunday at noon at US Bank Stadium?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that jumps off the page to me is this young Viking secondary. We've talked all offseason about it, how inexperienced they are. And right out of the gates, they get one hell of a test, if we're being completely honest. And Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Evans, his first 9 years, he's recorded at least 67 catches and 1,000 yards in every single season. One of the most electrifying and consistently great wide receivers in the league. So, first thing I'm really looking for is who is going to manage to hold these guys in check and just get this defense off the field down to like a 3rd and 5 where they need to come up with a pass breakup against one of these shifty, savvy veteran wide receivers.
Yeah, I think the idea throughout this week and then hopefully for the next 17 is the blitzing and the pass rush should get to the quarterback, in this case, Baker Mayfield, so that life is made easier on a Caleb Evans and Byron Murphy. I think that has to be the case based on this personnel. One thing I want to follow up and ask you about your contention here is the Vikings, through their actions for the last, my God, 8 months, have proven or shown that they like their cornerbacks. They had an opportunity to get Shaquille Griffin, who's just kind of a mid-tier cornerback. They could still get Bradley Roby. They could have got. They can still get William Jackson. They could have brought back Duke Shelley. They didn't have to cut Cameron Dantzler, but they've shown no interest in going to get even a basic experienced veteran corner. So they trust it. Should we trust it?
I mean, I think we kind of have to at this point. I mean, I do think that there's definitely a path for success in this defense. Like you said, if they're blitzing all the time and they're able to get pressure on the quarterback, it's not going to be nearly as easy as it was at times during 2022 for them to just sit back in the pocket, wait 3-4 seconds, and wait for a guy to get open and get him the ball. And if they're playing this press man coverage, there's not going to be these wide open, like under dink and dunk throws underneath that you can get like 8 chunk yards at a time and just steadily move down the field three first downs at a time. And so I do think that there's a path to success. I mean, Caleb Evans, he showed in his few starts last year that he can definitely play the position. Mekhi Blackman, he's a dog out there. He can do a press band coverage as good as anybody on this in the secondary. So I think that this is going to be a really good first test, but I do think that there is a path to success. They just need some of these young guys to truly step up and emerge from the pack.
I will tell our viewers that Caleb Evans and Byron Murphy should work just fine and dandy. Those two should do the trick. But last year we had simultaneous injuries to Andrew Booth, Caleb Evans, and Cameron Dantzler.
That can't happen.
Even if one of these guys goes down, especially if Mekhi Blackman's good in the slot, if one cornerback goes down and we're like, oh boy, you should be anxiety, because then you're turning to Andrew Booth. And then who knows after that?
Yeah.
You quite frankly don't know who would be the next man up. So I think any fear on the Vikings cornerback room in the realm of injury, we should be like, oh my goodness, what are they going to do? Because last year we didn't know we had Duke Shelley, but we did, and we're like, okay, this guy's a baller. And then I mean, you had a little bit of depth because Shelley was so good. All right, so how the secondary? I left out a bunch about the safeties, but how they come together? What is number two? For folks to watch, Buccaneers Vikings.
Number two, I'm keeping an eye on how this run defense performs against the running backs. I mean, Rachaad White in his rookie year, he had a few pretty solid games down the stretch of the season for Tampa Bay, helping them get their division title in the NFC South. I mean, 8-9 is not saying much in terms of a division champ, but they still made the playoffs, so we'll give it to them. We'll give them their flowers. This is still a reigning division champ that we're going up against. And then Sean Tucker, he is honestly, alongside Ivan Pace, one of the craziest UDFA stories of the entire summer. He went into the scouting combine, found out that he had this heart condition, so he had to sit out the entire combine, didn't get drafted, eventually got signed by the Bucs, had to sit out of mandatory minicamp, OTAs, and then finally got rolling in training camp. And he's just blossomed into this stud of a running back, and he's entering this week one as their RB2. So in just a few weeks' time, he's really shown that he can be a guy that can handle an NFL carry load out of the backfield. So I'm looking to see if this Vikings run defense, which was pretty atrocious at times last year, especially down the stretch of the season, they got off to a decent start, but it kind of fell apart towards the end. But with guys like Dean Lowry, Harrison Phillips, Kyrus Tonga, all these guys that they brought in, and Jacqueline Roy in the draft, and there's some decent depth there. So I'm just looking forward to seeing how they perform, because this Buccaneers offensive line is no joke either. They've still got Tristan Wirfs at left tackle. They drafted Cody Mauch in the second round, is playing right guard for them now, and he's a mauler in a run blocking, and he was throughout his entire career at North Dakota State. So it's going to be a test in the trenches too, and I think that it's going to ultimately, this game is going to come down to whether or not the Vikings can stop these running backs.
He's the dude that lost the teeth and just said the hell with it, right? I like it.
Yep, Cody Mauch. Yep.
All right. Yep. All right. People will remember the toothless grin. So the Vikings haven't had a good defense or a good run defense since 2019. The final two Zimmer renditions of run defense were particularly bad. And I know this because for the last three Viking seasons, I watch them on defense. And when one of the tailbacks gets 4 yards, I'm like, all right, baby, good. Like, yeah. I considered 2nd and 6 wonderful. And I didn't used to feel that during the good part of the Zimmer era. So I'm right there with you with the run defense. And then one thing to remember about the Buccaneers, even though it was last year, is every Buccaneers game with Brady last year with that 8-9 record had the same blueprint. They looked like shit through 3 quarters, and then good Brady returned for the 4th quarter. So I don't know if that will translate over to this year. I'm going to guess that shitty Brady is about on par with regular Mayfield. So it was so strange. I remember watching it vividly because I was always a big fan of Tom Brady. Every Buccaneers game last year was like, they just look anemic. And then the 4th quarter would show up and it's like, oh, there he is. He was just waiting. So I'll be interested to see if the Bucs come out like gangbusters or if they hopefully look like garbage and then the Vikings just stomp them out. I will get your prediction here in about 5 minutes on this game, but let me hear your third thing to watch for foremost.
I think that this offensive line, they have to find a way to stop Vita Vea in the middle, because that guy throughout his entire career, he's just been a constant run disruptor. He recorded a career high 6.5 sacks last year. And this Tampa Bay defense, they've got a couple really decent outside linebacker presences too, and Joe Tryon and Shaquille Barrett. So not only are they going to have to worry about Vita Vea in the middle of the defensive line, but these outside pass rushers are going to be coming at the tackles too. And obviously Christian Darrisaw, Brian O'Neill, they should be able to stop them most of the time. But inevitably it's going to come down to if this interior line is able to hold up against some of these pass rushers and keep Kirk Cousins' jersey clean.
And notably on the other half of the defense, correct me if I'm wrong, the Buccaneers still have Devin White,
yep,
Antoine Winfield, and Jamel Dean.
Jamel Dean, yeah, Antoine Winfield, Levante David.
Yeah,
Yeah, this
okay.
defense is absolutely loaded. I think it's going to be a top 10 defense in the NFL. So coming by points is not going to be easy in this game.
Yeah, that's a little bit strange to toss all of those names out because most of this offseason, if you follow NFL content, suggests the Buccaneers are a bottom five team, if not bottom three. And I don't know if that's
Yeah.
because they just look at Baker Mayfield at the top of the depth chart and they're like, oh no, they're not going to be any good. But all offseason on this show, with and without you, I've said, although this is an easy game for the Vikings compared to the other 16, the Bucs are not a shitty team. And I think because they're at the bottom of everybody's power rankings, we just assume that they're like the Cardinals, and they're nowhere near that. Is that wrong?
No, I think that's absolutely correct. And I mean, Kalaji Kancey, their first round pick, is another really great presence on their defense, too. I forgot to mention him. I feel like I need to throw his name in there, too.
Yeah.
But I mean, at the end of the day, this is a team that last year probably would have been around that 6-11, 7-10 mark alongside the rest of the NFC South if they didn't get all those heroics from Brady. So, I mean, Baker Mayfield, say what you will about, he's not the worst he's not going to be the worst starting quarterback in the league in week 1, but he's definitely a tier or two below Brady was even last year in his age 45 season. So I think that's where a lot of the question marks come in. Is this offense going to be able to match what the defense does on the other side of the ball? I just don't think it's going to happen. So I do think that the Vikings are going to end up winning this game. It just might be a little bit closer than a lot of people think it's going to be.
I was perusing the internet this morning before our show to figure out who's picking the Buccaneers, because the Vikings are 6-point favorites, which is a pretty big week 1 point spread. And the only one notable that viewers might know is Will Brinson from CBS. He's covered the sport for a very long time. And on NFLPickWatch.com, he predicted the Buccaneers. There's no like analysis or context. It's just a bunch of folks' picks, and they're tracked throughout the season. So Will Brinson's got the Bucs. God love them. All right, sir. Before we launch into these Super Bowl ins and outs, tell me your prediction: Week 1, Vikings Buccaneers.
I'm gonna go, I think, 27-17 Vikings. I think by the time the fourth quarter rolls around, I mean, Justin Jefferson's going to have a few crazy plays in there, even against this strong defense. Jordan Addison, I'm excited to see him on the field for the first time, see what he can do at the NFL level. And then the newly extended TJ Hawkinson, he's going to have a few nice plays in there too, I think. So at the end of the day, I think the Vikings, it might be a slow start in the first half. We might be looking at like a 10-10 score going into halftime or something like that. But I do think the Vikings are going to eventually get rolling.
One of my bold predictions for this week or for this season is that the Vikings finally beat somebody by 17 or more points, which
Okay.
we haven't had a blowout since 2019 against the Chargers. So I'm going to go 30-10 Vikings. Even though I just gave that big rah-rah speech about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense, I'm right there with you. It doesn't explain why they weren't very good last year, even if Brady showed up in the fourth quarter. So I do think that at some point, this Vikings blowout drought, in a good way, has to end. And I think this is the only real game this year that they can do it, unless the Bears are real bad or they get really hot against the Panthers, who nobody knows if Bryce Young is going to be the real deal right away. So we're both right there with a Vikings win, unsurprisingly. But let's chat about some of this Super Bowl stuff. There's not many folks at all, really, that think the Vikings will reach the Super Bowl, probably because the defense was so poor last year. And a lot of the world sees Kirk Cousins as a QB1 and thinks, oh, okay, well, they're not going to do anything. But if there is a pathway to a storybook season where they reach Super Bowl for the first time in 47 years and maybe win the damn thing, what's one of the things that absolutely has to occur?
I think we have to see some improvement, especially on the interior of the offensive line. Ed Ingram at right guard, he was horrendous in pass protection last year, one of the worst guards in the entire league. So I do think we're going to see a better version of Ed Ingram this year. He wasn't a second round pick for nothing in 2022. He definitely has the chops to get it done. It just, we talked about it throughout the offseason. It's just, guard is a little bit of a tough spot to throw in a rookie for a whole 17 game season and expect him to play really well. It just didn't happen last year, but I do think it's going to get a little bit better at the very least this year. But yeah, we just have to find a way to keep Kirk Cousins' jersey clean, because heading into age 35, he can't get hit 84 times this year.
I agree. And interestingly, if you look at the Vikings regular season depth chart, the one that they call unofficial, that they just released yesterday, the only spot on, well, actually, excuse me, they added David Quisenberry. when
Mhm.
they debuted the 53-man roster a week and a half ago, the only section of the depth chart that was exactly the same from last year when the 2022 53-man came out was offensive line. The only
Yep.
difference was Chris Reed this year is on the NFI list. He probably would have made the 53-man. So these Vikings are banking on continuity being the solution. And the Vikings offensive line was better last year than what we have seen since Cousins came to town, but it certainly wasn't good. I think just because it wasn't horrendous, we were like, all right, we're back, baby. But now it needs to try to be good, and I think they're banking on continuity. So just like the rest of the teams that are always there in late January, the offensive line has to be better than average. What is the next one for the Vikings to participate in the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I think this defense just has to live up to the hype that we've gotten all offseason with the Brian Flores blitzing, all the three safety things that they're going to do, throwing out Marcus Davenport, DJ Wanham, Daniil Hunter at the same time to get to the quarterback. I think that this has to work in order for the Vikings to make a push for the Super Bowl because we saw it last year. They had one of the better offenses in the league, but at the end of the day, their defense just couldn't hold up against the Giants in that wild card game. And they sure as hell wouldn't have held up against the Eagles the next week either. So even if they'd gotten past the Giants, they probably wouldn't have. It would have been the 49ers, but I don't think they would have beaten either one of the Eagles or the 49ers in order to get to the conference championship game. So I just think this defense, it doesn't have to be like a top 5 elite group, but it has to be at least average. Like they have to find a way to get off the field.
If you were forced to pick one or the other for what's more likely to happen, which is it? The offensive line becomes like a top 12, honest to goodness, top 12 unit, or that the Flores experiment works, to the tune of a top 12 defense?
I think I'd lean towards the offensive line.
Okay.
I think this defense is probably going to be around top 20 ish, but
Okay.
I think it's going to be hovering around average, especially with all these tough games that they get early on in the year. Like after this one, we got another Thursday night game in Philadelphia, a week 2 rematch of last year that didn't go well at all last season. So then it's right into the Chargers, and then a few weeks later you got the Chiefs, and it's a very tough go with things early on, and to get things settled in. I just don't think that these are the games that you want to play early on in a brand new defensive scheme. So I think I'd lean more towards the offensive line being a lot better.
Well, we'll take it because
Yeah.
anytime that we could get a sure thing offensive line, it's been so long since that's happened in these parts. We would certainly take it. I've been so focused on week 1 that I tend to forget that that's a Thursday nighter against the Eagles.
Yeah.
So what do we have? 2 Vikings games in the next?
In the next week, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that for
8
real?
days.
Holy, I'm gonna have to tweet that. My goodness. Yeah, it doesn't
Yeah.
it feels like the Eagles game is 3 months away right now. And I really don't know why. I should have more foresight and be thinking about it, but yeah, that's really odd. All right, the final thing that has to go well or almost flawless for the Vikings to get to the Super Bowl.
I think we need to see Jordan Addison not necessarily become like a superstar, but he needs to be one of these receivers from this rookie class as among the leaders in that group of receptions, receiving
Okay.
yards, even touchdowns. So I think that just getting another solid option alongside TJ Hawkinson, Justin Jefferson, and KJ Osborne's been great too. But I think that they need a guy that can take a little bit of a step above what Osborne has done over the past couple of seasons and kind of be the de facto Adam Thielen replacement, especially in the red zone, because down there he's been money over the past few years, and the Vikings no longer have that option. So I'm looking forward to seeing if Jordan Addison can be that kind of replacement.
Now that you know where all of the big 4 wide receivers from April's draft are situated, Jackson Smith and Jiba in Seattle, Addison here, Quentin Johnson in Los Angeles, and Zay Flowers in Baltimore, which one has the best chance to thrive in 2023?
I mean, it's hard not to pick Addison just because he's playing alongside Jefferson and Hawkinson. Like he's going to have open targets and on this offense. It's just inevitable. And
Mm-hmm.
Jackson Smith and Jigba, I think he's going to have a really nice year in Seattle as well. I'm a little hesitant to say that Quentin Johnston is gonna just immediately pop off down in LA, but I do think that Addison's going to be up there. So I think that among these 3 things that have to go right, this is the one that I'd place right at the very top of being like, hey, I think that's actually going to happen.
And it will have explained in retrospect, if that happens, why the Vikings invested that draft capital in Addison. Because you and I think separately from different states and houses were, screaming Deontay Banks here, people. And I
Yeah.
think based on the preseason and summer, I think we were right that that would have been a wonderful draft pick. Or even Dion Branch, who, like, it seems like all the guys that you liked are already ascending the reputation ranks, which we shall see how they do this week and beyond. But yeah, it would make sense. Like if the Addison experiment takes off right away and then continues beyond, it will make sense that all right, this is why they did that. Because they very vividly should have taken a defensive player, no matter if Joey Porter, Deontay Banks, that's what they needed. But because we all love wide receivers, few of us really complained. Correct?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, we also have to keep in mind that Osborne's contract is ending this year. And
Mm-hmm.
if Addison is a guy that can go get you 1,000 yards and double-digit touchdowns, something like that, then there's not really a huge need to go re-sign Osborne to a very lucrative contract. And if he probably is going to want a pretty big chunk of cash for his next deal. But with Justin Jefferson's contract coming up and that Christian Darrisaw, even Ezra Cleveland could get a new contract this season or this offseason. So I think that the plan is see what they got in Addison, and then hopefully he can be the guy that just takes over for Osborne if he ends up leaving.
All right, on presumably on your website, Purple PTSD, but for sure, because I saw it on Vikings territory, you offered a win-loss prediction. Explain that to the world, and we shall sign off for the week.
Yeah, so I've got the Vikings finishing the year at 10-7, second in the NFC North, behind those hated Detroit Lions. But I just think that at the end of the day, it's going to take a little bit of time for this defense to completely gel. I think they're going to get off to a little bit of a slower start with all the tough matchups and everything. The offense, I think, is going to be just fine with Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson, and Addison, all the guys we talked about. But yeah, it really just comes down to this defense finding a way to gel, especially in the second half of the year. And I think that they are going to manage to do that after the bye week and close out the season strong against those divisional opponents and find a way to get into the playoffs.
I can't recall. I should remember this, but did you, from a September bird's eye view, did you have them winning one road playoff game or a one
Yeah,
and done?
yeah. I have them right now. I have them finishing as a 6 seed, going on the road in Carolina and
Okay.
knocking off the Panthers and then
Oh,
losing
so
in the divisional.
all
Yeah,
right. So you found the compromise there.
I found the compromise.
You found the
Yep.
weak division winner. I like it, and then took it to Adam Thielen's Panthers. All right, my man. Well, the next time we chat, unbelievably, we'll be decompressing a Vikings win over the Bucks. It better be,
Yeah.
and then probably eerily afraid of the following day, when they take on the Eagles because hey, that's 8 days away. My goodness.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a fun couple days here and out in Minnesota. So yeah, looking forward to getting the season started.
All right, sir. We'll talk to you in 1 week to go over those very items. All right.
Sounds great, man. See you
All
then.
right. Take it easy. Later.